Yeah, I'm muted, but I'm not muted here, which is Jonathan's.
Tell me about. Why don't people take their seats? We have people online.
Yes, I'd like to encourage everyone to get a glass of wine if you'd like, to get some snacks, and then let's go ahead and get seated so we can get started. So we got some folks joining us on Zoom, and we'd just like to make really good use of our time today.
The scheduled starting time was 6 or 6:30.
I think 6. Let me double check, but I believe so. Yes. Yeah.
So if we wanted to start a little after.
Yeah.
Oh, look at the lots of people.
Yeah, a lot of people have joined us on Zoom.
There will be more.
I just want to remember the nominal 6:30 or 6.
Oh, 6.
Okay, so here we are.
But wait a second, but I did let people know
Yeah.
that we're probably gonna be very distracted.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
just-
we can pass the time for the next few minutes.
Yeah.
So what's the, tell the people online
Yeah.
when we're actually going to begin, so they know.
Yeah. So to all of our friends, waiting for people who might be stuck in traffic or arriving a few minutes late, but we're starting to get ourselves focused here in the room, as you can see if I show you there. You can wave at everyone in Rochester. So yeah, we'll get started in just a minute, but we'll allow a couple minutes for anyone else who may be just arriving. Yeah, which is in just a few minutes. But in the meantime, if anyone needs just a simple logistics, for those who need biology breaks, like the bathroom, you go through that door and you'll see them right across the hall. So they're very nearby. And I'm Joe, I'm your guest entertainer for the evening. And this is my partner, Penny, sitting here, mostly enjoying cheese and crackers. We've been the haggard road travelers for the last 2 weeks. As we'll talk about a little bit, we started our journey in the greater Toronto area, where we were all of last week, visiting lots of people and having lots of conversations. And then on Monday, we were in Binghamton, Tuesday in Ithaca, Wednesday up until this morning in Cleveland, and now we're here with all of you. So really excited to be here. And I think others will be introducing. I'm keeping you guys occupied so you don't get too bored while we're given a couple more minutes. And we got a lot of friends on Zoom that you can't see because they all have their cameras off. You guys are being so shy. What is that all about? That's all right. You guys can drink beer and wine along with us, and then you don't have to show us your faces.
We can do a check. Are those of you on Zoom hearing Joe and me adequately? You can respond by text or by speaking up.
Yep, they hear us just fine. Thank you, Laura.
Yes, we hear fine. Thank you, Laura. We're going to start in 3 minutes at 6:10.
So I guess I wrangled you too soon. If anyone needs more wine or cheese or crackers, apparently I jumped the gun. And also I'm wearing this strange earbud, which causes me to not hear out of this ear, so that people on Zoom can hear me with a microphone that's in it.
And Joe,
So I'll look this way to talk to you.
Are you going to tell your personal story, or shall I actually give you an introduction?
As you prefer.
I'll give you a brief introduction, and then you can fill in the gaps.
I'm really excited to hear how he tells my story. It's challenging for me to tell.
Joe, what should we expect?
What should you expect tonight? You should expect big picture vision, a sense of the level of crisis for the planet, a possible pathway for addressing it, and how it relates to what you can do here. In general terms of the survival of the human race and a few million other species that are at risk.
Yes.
Something of that nature. Yeah. Well, actually in an hour. And then we'll spend the rest of the time chatting and drinking more wine. So yeah. It helps to have a good sense of humor to get through the seriousness of the conversation.
way, we are gonna record this, and if you don't want, there's 30 people in here. If you don't.
Well, I was actually going to turn this way so that people could see me, and then I'll mostly have it in presentation mode. So they'll be seeing my slides. They won't be seeing all of your lovely faces.
Earbud is not great, so when I introduce you, I'm going to take that earbud.
That's fine by me. Yeah, you just.
The time.
Yeah. How are you? Yeah. There's wine and snacks in the back. Grab a chair. Grab a name.
Oh, well. Thank you.
You're welcome. I don't want to lose this earbud.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, and children of all ages, welcome. I'm John Shull, co-founder of the Eco Restoration Alliance, and behind Jonathan and Victoria, who we salute. And Anna, I have done a little bit of the organizing of this meeting, but they've done the better part. My job really is just to introduce first Lisa Barron, our gracious host, who will tell us a little bit about herself and Greentopia. Then I'll introduce Joe, and then Joe will save the world and we'll all go home.
No hero, no hero.
I need-
This is an all
That's your
hero.
microphone.
That's my microphone.
No, don't put it in your ear, just put it.
Does it put it right? Oh, all right. So my name is Lisa Barron. I'm the executive board chair of Greentopia. So Greentopia has been around since 2011. We are an organization that's dedicated to creating urban green space. And I think we've done a pretty darn good job, because if you look to your, let me see, I'm directionally challenged. Your left, you'll see the New York State's initial stab at renditions of what a state park in the middle of downtown Rochester could look like in about 5 or 6 years. So believe it or not, Rochester has a 96-foot high waterfall, a river and a gorge right in the heart of downtown. And we've been advocating for its use and access to the public for years. The other thing we do, we create beautiful urban gardens in downtown Rochester. We run a workforce development program in the Josana neighborhood and on Smith Street. We farm over 2 acres of vacant lots, and we grow commercial grade flowers. We employ neighborhood kids who are either formerly incarcerated, didn't graduate from high school, developmentally disabled, single parents. We pay them, it's their first job, and they get workforce development trainings, including an introduction to landscape technician that we partner with Cornell Cooperative Extension. They get OSHA 10 certification. Some of them get driver's licenses if they so choose, and a resume. And then they're off to the races, right? We have a 85 to 90% graduation rate. We've graduated over 100 kids from the program. It's really very, very successful. So that's what I do. I encourage you to take one of these. They're up here. This is a survey that Genesee Land Trust and Greentopia developed to start the conversation about what an urban state park in Rochester, New York looks like. And so it's a survey for you to voice your opinions about what should be in our state park, because the state's really good at parks, but they have very little experience in urban state parks, right? And the clientele that will be using this urban state park is totally foreign to most of the state parks in New York State. So it's going to be challenging, but we got a long runway to get it right. So that's all I got to say. All right. Thank you.
So much. And Lisa, thank you again for hosting this. So those pamphlets that Lisa spoke about are really important, so you can voice your opinion. And I just want to tell you one opinion I'd like you to voice. An urban state park ought to be reachable by bike and by foot by everybody in the city without having to deviate from the riverway. It's possible. The engineers know they could do it, but currently the plans suggest that you're going to have to hit the wall that is currently the inner loop and then go out to State Street through traffic and then back into High Falls. You ought to have a straight shot, and I'm looking forward to you helping the state realize that there should be a direct connection between the park and the city. I could go home now a happy man. This, by the way, is Ben Rubin, my co-conspirator on that particular campaign. But I want to introduce Joe Brewer. Joe turns out to be a really interesting figure in these strange times that we live in. He was a full-bore academic, as I understand it, complexity scientist, physicist, studied philosophy, a number of other things. He's worked with some very big names in both linguistics and in evolution and ecology, and I think complexity science. And then he picked up and moved to Columbia in order to begin doing and articulating a region, a vision of how to restructure human existence on a finite planet. And that story he knows how to tell better than I do, so I'm just going to give him as much time as possible and introduce Joe Brewer. Thank you all for coming.
John, that's so sweet of you. So hi, everyone on Zoom. I'm going to go into presentation mode. So just wanted you to see I'm here. Hi. I'm going to do screen sharing and get us ready to go. Here we are. Oh, wait. Got to minimize this so that it doesn't get in my way. And now, there we go. Awesome. So hi, everyone. I'm Joe. This is my partner, Penny, here in the front. We are traveling around, having conversations about what we're about to talk about tonight. We have our resident, no longer groupie, but elevated to road crew, which is Anna here, who came to see us in Toronto last week, was with us in Cleveland yesterday, and she's from Buffalo, so she's sort of like centrally located. What I want to do tonight is take us through what might be a bit of a sweep of emotions, because we're going to talk about the state of the world. Some of you may already know that I don't pull any punches about the state of the world. I try to get as accurate and honest of a perspective as I can, because if we don't understand what's really going on with the world, we can't do anything about it. And there are some really serious flaws and misdirections in the way the story is told. This is one example. If anyone thinks that we can avoid abrupt, catastrophic climate change by 2030, well, you'll see in my presentation that it already happened in the 1970s. And so the stories do not match to reality. And we need to really know what's going on. I'd like to start by explaining something about my opening slide, which I want you to notice, first of all. Oh, it says your screen sharing. Oh, good. Not do that. Will that please not show up there? Oh, no. Yeah, but it's showing for us. That's annoying. That's a feature of Zoom. I apologize for that little guy. But I want you to notice that I did not put my name on the presentation. That's intentional. A lot of times people will say, look, my name's Joe. Look at the letters behind my name. I'm important. Listen to me. And I actually want to give you my only credential that I think gives me any authority to stand here, which is that I'm the father of a 6-year-old daughter. And with what I know about the state of the world, I consciously participated in bringing a child into the world. There are a lot of young people today who will not do that. A lot of teenagers who think they'll never have kids because they're so scared, they're scared shitless about the state of the future. And so I'm not putting my name on here because I don't want to speak as Joe Brewer. I want to speak to you as the earth. I want to send a message from the earth to all of you. And then the other thing I want you to know is that I picked some words that are up here that are not common words. These words regenerate the earth. When I started writing and talking about earth regeneration, I was surprised when I did Google searches that I was the only one talking in that way. Oh, why is that? And it wasn't because of clever marketing. It wasn't because I claimed the name. There are actually two reasons. And I worked with a famous linguist named George Lakoff back in 2007, 2008, became an expert in strategic framing and language, and worked with social movements around the world to help them with language. So I understood what it meant that people were not using this phrase. And I realized there were two reasons. The first reason was that I had met a lot of environmental activists who were so cynical and depressed and disgusted about the state of the world that they felt the planet would be better if it just shook off this parasite, this vermin, this disease that is the human race. They'd actually become so cynical that they couldn't imagine the earth healing without getting rid of the bad humans. So it's this place of deep, deep trauma in those people. And then the other thing that causes people to not use this phrase is the audacity, the incredulity, the inability to believe we could actually regenerate the earth. Because like, if we can't get people to pick up their litter on my own street, how the hell could we actually regenerate the whole earth? And so I realized people were not using this language for that combination of reasons. And so I'm not using this language to be like this great person at marketing. It's to indicate a level of healing that is needed to even have this conversation. And so regenerating the earth is going to be really hard. It's going to involve significant difficulties and sacrifice, and it's going to require humans to bring out our very best. And it involves believing in this really important idea, which is that the earth is better off with humans, and that humans can actually make the environments that we're in better by being a part of them. And in our modern world with our civilization patterns, we don't really get much support for that belief. So this is a really important thing to have in mind. So with that said, let's get started. Is this thing working now? Maybe not. That's fine. I can use this. It fell asleep. Come on. Start working again. Are you working now? There we go. Got it. Is this going to work? Yes. Okay. All right. Technology goes to sleep. So when I traveled around the world looking at different kinds of regenerative projects, like when I was in Costa Rica, for example, and I'm like, this is an amazing permaculture farm, or that's a really great regenerative farming project, or look at this reforestation effort. I noticed that every one of them was limited by a very important fact, which is that they were always based in a well-defined plot of land. So you might look and see this amazing permaculture project, like 20 acres of land. Everything they're doing in it is awesome, but someone upstream is dumping pollution into the waterway. It flows across their land and flows down. And I saw that they could not have holistic or systemic solutions because every plot of land is embedded within a larger fabric of ecological connections. And those ecological connections, like the movement of water across the land, are really where all of the dynamics of the land occur. But the ecological connections are always embedded. So this is still not working. Fine. Do it this way. What's going on? Would you please work? If not, I'll just stop using the slides. There we go. They're always embedded within a larger holistic landscape, like an entire watershed for a river, an entire mountain range, or a coastal estuary. And so,
Sorry, there's people entering the waiting room and they aren't being admitted.
Yeah, we have a guy in the background who will let them in.
Oh, okay, sorry.
yeah, no, yeah, that we don't have to do it on the screen, but thank you. Anna cares so much about helping everyone be included. So high fives on that one. So there are these holistic landscapes that actually, they're holistic because they hold the patterns of the entire life system of the place. And so these holistic landscapes are a scale at which the plot of land, the individual project, doesn't get to. But then those holistic landscapes are always embedded within larger planetary processes. And so what I learned by realizing that there were these different levels was that, first of all, there are no solutions. This is an important thing to say. There are no solutions to our planetary predicament because we are in a predicament and not a problem. Problems have solutions. Predicaments are situations where there's so much interdependency that when you solve something over here, you mess up something over there. And so this is because of this nested nature of reality. And what I came to realize was that the way to navigate through the predicament that we're in, which we'll talk about in a moment, does not occur at any of these scales. Instead, it occurs in the interactions between the scales. It's the interactions between the scales that show us the way through our planetary predicament. And we're going to see that today. So with that in mind, just a quick survey. Who here has heard of the planetary boundaries as a framework? Awesome, like a little more than half of you. I love being in rooms where more than half know this. So planetary boundaries, for everyone to just get on the same page. This is a framework developed by the Stockholm Resilience Center. They are a group of 3,500 Earth system scientists. So this is not one of those fringe on the side, two researchers published a paper. This is a collaboration of a major community of people who study the dynamic Earth. They asked a really important question in about 2009. The question they asked was, with everything we know about the dynamic Earth, are there any thresholds or limits that if we crossed those thresholds, that we would go out of the Holocene, this stable, warm, 12,000 year period of time, and we would cause breakdowns and cascades across the Earth system, which would then jeopardize the ability to have a global economy or a global civilization. Because the Holocene is the only period in which we've had large-scale agriculture, city-states, empires, or civilizations. When they asked this question, they went and did the research, and they came out and said, okay, we found out the answer. There are 9. There are 9 of these planetary boundaries. Climate change is only one of them. So when people talk about climate change, it's one of the 9 planetary boundaries. Another one is called biosphere integrity, which is the biodiversity or the rate of extinction for species. The third one is land system change, which is when you take healthy, complex ecosystems and degrade them through deforestation. Maybe this is to prepare land for agriculture or for urban landscapes. A fourth one is freshwater use. Then there's biogeochemical flows of nitrogen and phosphorus to synthetic fertilizers used in industrial agriculture that run off in the rivers, run into the oceans and create massive dead zones in the world ocean. Then there's ocean acidification. Notice ocean acidification is caused by climate change, but it also can happen from ocean pollution. And then there's atmospheric aerosol loading, which is another way of saying air pollution. Then there's stratospheric ozone depletion, because the ozone layer filters out the ultraviolet radiation that would kill all life on land. So it protects us. And then there's this category called novel entities, when something's introduced that the planet can't handle. And so they're like, all right, there are 9 of these categories. We figured this out. Cross even one and global civilization is called into question. How are we doing? Have we crossed any of them? And so in 2015, they found out we crossed 4. We had crossed the thresholds for climate change, biosphere integrity, that's called the mass extinction event, land system change, and biogeochemical flows of nitrogen and phosphorus. But then the research continued, and they got better and better at measuring these things. And they found, and they reported in 2021, that we had also crossed the boundaries for freshwater use and ocean acidification. And then the research continued, and in 2022, they said, we have all these microplastics, these long-lasting industrial chemicals that are now ubiquitous in every glass of water and in the breast milk of every woman on Earth. And those microplastics are causing all kinds of problems, like way off the charts for what the planet can handle for microplastics. And so what you can see from this little exercise is that we are in the midst of planetary breakdown and collapse of a catastrophic scale, and we're already in the middle of it. And we've already crossed 7 of the 9 planetary boundaries. So this is where we are. And this is without talking about abrupt climate change which we could also talk about. We could talk about the Greenland ice sheet causing what's called the thermohaline circulation, or the Great Conveyor Belt of the World Ocean. We could talk about the Amazon rainforest on the edge of collapse because of deforestation, and on and on. There are a lot of things going on, but what this does is gives us a summary of the state of the planet. And so we need to understand how this works. So we're at the dark part of the story. The dark part of the story is the reality of where we are, is that we are in the middle of a totally intense transformation of the Earth as a living system. And to show you how this works, I want to tell you a story of interdependence. The story of interdependence takes place in this region of Africa, colored in blue, which is called the Sahel Desert. We also sometimes call it Sub-Saharan Africa. And in the Sahel Desert, something happened that we all know about. Who here remembers all those starving kids in Africa in the 1980s and the 1990s, right? And those of us who are old enough will remember Suzanne Struthers from Save the Children. You know, we need money for all these starving kids in Africa. Yes, there were starving adults too, but the marketing research showed that talking about kids got people to donate more money. That's why they talked about kids. So people were starving all over Africa. But do you know why? Do you know what was going on? Well, it took 50 years to find the answer. I was sort of shocked that I had never thought to ask, why were they all starving? That was this huge news for decades. It turns out the answer is in a set of atmospheric research journals, because it's a collection of articles published between 2010 and 2012, who do something called atmosphere-ocean coupled general circulation models. And what they found was this. This right here is a NASA image today of sulfate aerosols, which is where sulfur is part of particles that are floating in the atmosphere. And I want you to notice that it rotates around the equator from Southern Europe down to Central Africa. Well, this was happening before too. The story goes like this. Between 1870 to 1940, industrialism takes place in Europe. And there are several places, in particular London, Paris, and Berlin, where there were power plants and factories that used coal. And the coal that they burned had a lot of sulfur in it. And when they burned the coal, it released sulfate aerosols into the atmosphere. Sulfate aerosols in the atmosphere can either extend or shorten the length of time for clouds, depending on if they're high in the atmosphere or low in the atmosphere. So it's a complex story. But the important thing to know is the sulfate aerosols being released in Europe changed the heat exchange of the atmosphere by changing the lifetime of clouds. When that happened, it caused a shift in the weather patterns in what's called the tropical jet stream, and what's also called the intertropical convergence zone, which is an area near the Tropic of Cancer. And that caused a shift in the jet streams in the southern hemisphere near the Tropic of Capricorn. And what this led to was this. The Sahel Desert had a monsoon, an annual rainfall pattern. And you can see it here in green. From 1950 to 1965, it's raining every year. From 1965 to 1970, it's weak. 1970 onward, no more monsoon. It shuts down. When the Sahel monsoon shut down, it caused agriculture in sub-Saharan Africa to collapse, leading to mass starvation, violence, and genocide. This is an example of abrupt climate change, planetary scale, that happened last century. So why don't we know about this? Well, because when it was published in 2010, 2011, 2012, not only was it not yesterday's news, it was last century's news. So no one was talking about it. So the lesson for this is that the whole story was invisible. It was invisible because there was a chain of causation. There wasn't a simple cause-effect relationship. The burning of coal in specific places changed the aerosol composition, changing the heat transfer in clouds, changing weather patterns. There's a chain of causation. It was over a long distance. about 6,000 miles north to south between Southern Europe and Central Africa. It was delayed in time by decades. The accumulation of the pollution was from 1870 to 1940, and the monsoon didn't shut off until 30 years later. There were interwoven narratives, meaning there were different stories told by different people in different places at different times. And no one had the whole story because atmospheric science had to improve enough to be able to figure the story out decades later. And we also needed satellite data and high performance computers, et cetera, all these things they didn't have in the 20th century. And of course, there was a lot more going on in this. So what you can see here is that there's a story of profound interdependence. So the lesson for us is this: the Earth is a whole integrated system. And there can be cascading effects, cascading relationships with profound time delays, which means breakdowns can occur across space, time, and causation. Now, as scary as this is, because this reveals the nature of systemic risk for the planet, there's a silver lining. There's a silver lining in this. Look at how well we understand the Earth. Look at how far Earth system science has come. To be able to tell this story means that we understand those cause-effect relationships. We understand those interdependencies, and the knowledge is getting better all the time. And so if there is a way to understand systemic risk from one part of the planet to another, there is a way to create systemic resilience from one part of the planet to another. And that's what we're going to talk about now. There's a little secret, one of those comments that will sound so mundane, it's shocking in how important it is. And it is this: everything that happens on Earth happens somewhere. There's always a place where things happen. So for us to see how to build systemic resilience for the Earth, we need to start by knowing where we are. So there we are. We're in Rochester, right? We're right here on the southern border of Lake Ontario on the North American continent. And you know, we talked about how we are embedded within nested layers with land connected to ecological connections into landscapes, into planetary processes. So we want to know, how is this place embedded? What is the context where we are here in Rochester? And what we can see is we're like right there, right? Right in here. And you can see we're part of a much larger system, the Great Lakes. And I was really fascinated to discover the answer to this question, but how much water is in the Great Lakes? Oh my God, it's incredible. The Great Lakes hold 20% of the fresh water on Earth. So just for perspective, 99% of the water on Earth is salt water. 1% of the water is fresh water, because almost all of it's in the ocean. Of the 1% of water that's fresh water, 1/5 of it is in the Great Lakes. So just for perspective, that's the same amount of water as in the Amazon River. This is 200 rivers in the same basin spread across half a continent to have the same amount of water that's concentrated in the Great Lakes, which means the Great Lakes are a strategic reserve of planetary significance. And because of deforestation and fragmentation, the Amazon rainforest is on schedule to transition permanently from forest to grassland savanna in the next 2 to 3 years because of the rate of deforestation and fragmentation, which means South America is about to dry out. And that means that the Great Lakes could very soon be 30% of the fresh water on Earth because this is going to dry out. And it's happening now. And so you can see that nearly half of the fresh water on Earth is in these two places. And we all know about the Amazon, but we don't talk about the Great Lakes in this way. So for us to see that we are in a place right now of significant strategic importance for the entire planet. There's no other place on Earth with this abundance of water. No other place on Earth with fresh water like the Great Lakes. And this brings us to another interesting thing, is like there are natural patterns to the world. So how does land organize itself? Here we have Africa. And if I was to ask you, how would we regenerate the health and well-being of the continent of Africa? 55 nations, the largest continent on the planet. You'd be like, I have no idea, it's so big. But if you visualize the rivers, you'll see that the land is already organized by water. The water lands, it drops, it touches the ground, and the land knows where the water will go. And the water knows how to move because the land has organized itself around water. There are about 400 rivers, maybe 500 rivers on the African continent. And if each river, if the people living in each river decided to restore the health and well-being of their river, if all of the rivers did this, they would regenerate the entire continent of Africa. And so this is what we're doing in Colombia, where Penny and I live. This right here, you see a topographic map of Colombia. These are the northern Andes. Panama's that way. Amazon's over here. And we're right here in this great turn of the Andes. And there are 3 mountain ranges, a line of mountains here on the west, another one here, and another one there. To make something almost like a triangle, which defines a well-contained regional climate system that has a unique type of ecology. It's called the High Andes Tropical Dry Forest. It's almost 80% endemic, which means 8 out of 10 species only exist there, nowhere else. And it's 95% deforested and in the process of becoming a desert. And we are working to create a framework of collaboration for regenerating that entire landscape. So just to give you a visual impression, that's Barichara right there. It's a town of about 6,000 people. It's called the prettiest town in Colombia. It's a tourist destination. And as you can see in this picture, it really is quite beautiful there. And this part in the foreground is a reforestation effort that's being run within the community called Bioparque Moncora. So I just wanted you to see that this is Barichara, where we live and where we're doing our work. And the way that we're going about this work is we're creating a design school for healing the entire landscape. To get a sense of how this works, if you look, you can see here, it's all deforested over here, it's not green. These dots and these squares represent different regenerative projects that are on their own plots of land within the landscape. And we're looking at how to connect them with each other ecologically and culturally to become a pattern of landscape regeneration. The way we're doing this is with 4 primary patterns that are at a territorial scale. One of those patterns is the restoration of entire watersheds. So we're working to create watershed councils. We're working to create community aqueducts for the management of water. We're helping with reforestation and water retention systems to help recharge the aquifers, because most of the streams in the whole landscape have dried up. They're just dead, or they're so full of pollution that nothing can live within them. So it's something that's true all over Latin America. So restoration of watersheds is a territorial scale pattern. Then there's the Learning Center and Syntropic Agroforestry. So I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. But basically, we're doing reforestation in a way that allows us to grow food, textiles for clothing, construction materials like lumber, and medicinal plants, all in the same system, while creating an economic pattern of exchange. And so we're doing reforestation and building agroforestry systems connected to the restoration of watersheds. And then we're working to transform the local food system, which is about changing the way people grow food and manage land across the territory. And then we're working on the design of alternative economic systems, solidarity exchanges, collaboration, things that don't require money because people trade with each other directly. So we're working on different ways of creating a local economy that keeps all of the value created within the local economy. And these are all patterns of landscape scale regeneration. To give you more of a concrete sense of how this works, I want to tell you about my friend Felipe. That's Felipe right there. Felipe is a father of 4. He's an amazing dad. He's also a teacher. And one of the things he's been doing is empowering the kids, the children, to know how to lead the way. And what they're doing in this activity is they've taken the children to walk the watersheds of the Barichara River so that the children can explain to the adults how to bring dead rivers back to life. And this came out of an event that we had about 1.5 years ago, where we were celebrating all of the regenerative projects in our territory, a lot of people in the community, and a 6-year-old boy named Sebastian asked for the microphone. He wasn't on the agenda. He wasn't on the program. We give him the microphone and he says, I want to clean up the Barichara River because I want to go fishing. And there are no fish in the streams. And this inspired his friend, another 6-year-old boy named Alun, to stand up and ask for the mic and say, I want to clean up the river too. And the adults were so inspired that even though we were there to ask people to donate money to some of the other projects, people donated money to them. And then we did the responsible thing, led by Felipe, which is the kids now had a bunch of money. It's about $100 US, which in Colombia is actually a lot of money. And meaning the kids could do something. They could do something. So we had the kids gather, children between the age of 4 and 10, and talk about how to restore the Barichara River. And our job as adults was to take them seriously. Our job as adults was to listen to them. And so we sat in council and listened to their ideas. You know what kinds of ideas they had? What if we make bundles of grass and put mushrooms in them and we can use them to filter the water to take the contaminants out? That's a good idea. Turns out these kids are watching YouTube videos and getting great ideas. And we're like, hell yeah, let's do some, micro remediation of the river. The kids want to do it. And so what this led to is a project Felipe did called Pasos de Agua, which means the steps of water, the steps that water takes, where the children walk the landscape where the rivers were, where the streams were, asking the adults what happened to the water to build conscience and awareness in the adults while working on restoring the water. And now Felipe, with a group of other adults and teachers, are creating a pedagogical strategy for how curriculum are developed in the schools so the kids can collaborate to restore dead rivers. And this was so powerful that some of the indigenous peoples, like this man from the Muisca culture, who's one of the elders of one of the tribes of Colombia, came to listen to the children and give them advice. And we're starting this intergenerational pattern of relationships about restoring watersheds, led by the children. And I mean led by the children. This is Quetzal. She's 7. And here she is presenting the ideas that the kids have for the adults to hear about how to restore the river. And so the idea is we're creating a different way of doing politics, a different way of governing, a different way of teaching, and a different way of taking action, all embedded in the landscape itself. And I have this picture here because this is Gabriela, and that's her granddaughter, Soraya. And this is to show you another thing that we do. We make a point that every time that the adults are sitting in an important conversation, that we place the children in the center of the circle and they play among us. Because we know 2 things. We know that those kids, when they grow up, are going to ask, what were the adults doing when we were kids? And we want them to remember that we were serious about these threats and these challenges, and that we were doing our very best. The other reason those kids sit in the circle is to remind us what we're doing all of this for. It's for the continuation of the human presence in the place where we live. These are both things that indigenous cultures around the world do, and that we're doing in Barichara. So just to give you a feel for how some of this looks, this is Bioparque Moncora. Now the picture I showed you of Barichara was taken from about right here. This is the town of Barichara. It was actually taken from right there. So this is the Bioparque. But what I want you to notice is that there are different projects colored in here that are in yellow, but they're connected to landscape patterns like surface water, groundwater and aquifers, ecological corridors for migration patterns of animals, And we're organizing our projects around these connective patterns of land. And of course, for those of you who know about Colombia's history, there was an extended period of violence, 57 years of extreme violence. It was multipolar terrorism, where in most places, at least 3 groups were randomly killing the population in acts of terror in an endless cycle of violence, with one of those being government-sponsored death squads. And so there's a long history of trauma and violence in Colombian history, which means the adults have to learn how to cooperate. They have to heal their traumas and come and build trust. So we have a lot of ways that we try to build trust among the adults. But that opens up a question. The adults are all traumatized by violence. What if the children were never traumatized in the first place? What if we knew how these traumas occur and we preemptively address them? This is my daughter, Elise. She's planting a cactus in our food forest. And I just want you to see, that I want you to see Elise because I'm a proud dad. No, I want you to see, like, when children have the ability to connect directly with nature in unstructured ways, with the adults around doing responsible things. She just turned 6. She knows how to build water retention ditches. She knows she can collect native seeds. She knows how to plant them. She knows how to do composting. When I asked her, do you know how to bring a dead river back to life? And she said, yeah, I take one of my dad's shovels, I dig a hole so that the water will go in it. I plant trees around it so they grow. She's 6. She knows how to restore watersheds. And so this idea of learning how to regenerate landscapes with everyone in the community embedded in the patterns of the landscape is incredibly powerful. In this picture, I want you to notice that the younger kids are on the left, the older kids are on the right. And this is because the younger kids were asked to collect sacred objects from the forest that bring special powers to the bigger kids to help them on their journey to restore dead rivers. Notice how everyone's a teacher, everyone's a student, it's completely embedded in community. Yeah, there's my daughter Elise right there. Proud dad. But this way of restoring a river is deep, profound spiritual regeneration. And so I just wanted you to get a sense of how rich and how multifaceted and how beautiful this work can be. And this brings us to one of the most important concepts for regenerating the earth, the concept of bioregions. Now, if you've heard of bioregions or bioregionalism, you might think it's like a social movement because back in the 1960s and 70s, it was connected with the Back to the Land movement, like escape from civilization. That's not untrue, but there's actually a technical definition. So bioregion is short for biological region. The insight is that any population of an organism has a geographic range that it lives within. So there is an entire context in which the life system of the organism and its entire population can live. To give an example, starfish. These are starfish on the coast of Oregon, and they have a bioregion. The bioregion is called the intertidal zone, the range of low tide to high tide, tidal pools. There might be a coral reef, but there's a well-defined range for the entire life system of starfish. All the food that they need, their habitat and shelter, their ability to reproduce, the entire life system of the starfish has a biological region. And the bioregion of a starfish is the intertidal zone. This way of thinking applies to every organism on Earth. It's a little bit more complex and nuanced for humans, but it applies to us too. And so the insight that comes from this is that humans can learn how to organize ourselves as bioregions. Then our bioregions, by definition, are a whole system, the entire life context for our population. So each bioregion is a whole system model for its own regeneration. If you were to look at this place here and say, what would be the whole life context for people to live sustainably in Rochester, you would find a pattern of geography that is consistent with that. And so if humans started to organize ourselves this way, all over the planet, we could create a planetary network of bioregions, and we could engage in learning exchanges with each other to get better. Like, oh, well, those guys over in Toronto, they're doing some really cool stuff. What can we learn from them on this side of Lake Ontario? And we can engage in exchanges with each other. So see, what needs to happen is this. We need to learn how to live sustainably by recreating the conditions for living locally in terms of material flows. When I say integrated life systems, I mean integrating ourselves with the rest of life, the plants, the animals, the fungi, the bacteria, and the thriving of families and communities. Now, this map for me is really powerful because this is a map of ecotypes or ecozones, meaning each color tells you that that place has a particular kind of soil, a particular kind of local climate, and a particular kind of ecosystem that lives in that place. Which means if humans create bioregions across the planet, they will be unique to each place. And we would have a great diversity of human cultures across the planet and the local living economies that exist in them. This might sound familiar. That's how the indigenous people have done it forever. And by the way, while it is not true that all indigenous cultures are sustainable, it is true that all sustainable cultures that we know of are indigenous. And so a great way to find the bioregion for your place is to look at the ancestral lands and the territorial patterns of the indigenous people in each place. And you will see a whole system for sustainable cultures. It's not an accident that that happened. So back in 1972, there was a really important study that was done. It was called Limits to Growth. It was a group of computer scientists at MIT, and they created the first computer model for the material flows of the global economy. And they created this term, business as usual. That's where that term comes from. It was one of their scenarios. That scenario was not a prediction or a forecast, but it has tracked reality so well that that breakdown in the planetary boundaries is right on schedule, according to the model business as usual from Limits to Growth in 1972. And after that study came out, there was this huge intellectual exploration. How do we create planetary sustainability within the limits of the planet? The group that did this was called the Balaton Group because they initially gathered at Lake Balaton in Hungary. And they spent 10 years traveling to different universities, holding conferences and seminars. And at the end of this, they came to this conclusion. Vernon Rutten is an agricultural economist or an agronomist. And he said this, each agroeconomic region is so unique that the concept of transfer of technology is irrelevant. What's relevant is the transfer of the capacity to develop technology and institutions that are consistent with the cultural endowment and the resource endowment of each region. And then Dana Meadows, who is the lead author of Limits to Growth, who literally wrote the book Systems Thinking, she said this, out of those 10 years of discussions came a vision of a number of centers where information and models about resources and the environment are housed. There would need to be many of these centers all over the world, each one responsible for a distinct bioregion. She said this in 1983, 40 years ago. I was 6 years old when she said this. These were the best sustainability thinkers of the 1970s. And you know what? They were right. This is still the only way to do it. And what's interesting is how different this is from putting solar panels on your roof or swapping out your internal combustion engine for batteries that are made by mining mountains and ocean floors. Somewhere between then and now, the whole conversation became profoundly technocratic, reductionistic, and avoided the reality that we have to deeply change culture, economics, and politics. So we need to create bioregional learning centers. We need to create capacities for bioregions to learn and manage themselves. So now back to Barichara. Here's some of the projects that we collaborate with in our community. And I just want you to get a feel for them. You don't need to be able to read them, but just notice, like, here's Casa Común. This is a project to create exchanges between local food producers and artisans who make different kinds of crafts, clothing makers, and so on for a local community market. And then there's Fundación Monte Chico, which tries to preserve cultural knowledge by teaching kids the uses of native plants and how to make textiles and natural fabrics from the local plants. And then there's Agua Santa, which is a regenerative farm that is also part of a network of 14 regenerative farms that practice composting and biochar and soil building and operate as a cooperative to build soils, restore watersheds, and maintain food security. So you see, even without naming all of them, you can see these are different projects with different strengths. They're connected into the landscape, but how would you organize them? How would they collaborate with each other? How would they integrate with each other? When I show them to you like this, you really can't tell. But if you look at them this way, where we place them on the map, we start to see that the land already has patterns of connectivity. And we can ask ourselves, how can these different projects integrate with each other through the connectivity of the land itself? This is the work of a bioregional learning center, to learn how the landscape functions, to learn about the local ecology, the local plants, and to learn how to collaborate and bring them together, which is what we're doing in Barichara. And just as an example, this is one of our projects where we're practicing syntropic agroforestry. And what you can see here is that everything in this scene, aside from Elise, my daughter, everything here, and there's one tree, everything but this tree and Elise was planted 2 months earlier. And before that, this was filled with invasive grass. And what we're doing here is building an agroforestry system that was planted by 30 members of the community in a workshop, where in the span of 2 days, they planted 9,000 plants. And they use syntropic principles, which means that this system is designed by the selection of plants to have all of the plants cooperating with each other with no competition. There's one plant that is covering the ground. There's one plant that's holding the water. There's one plant that's fixing nitrogen. There's one plant that's growing more quickly to protect the others from wind. We're selecting the plants based on their place in the ecological succession, the natural development of ecosystems, so that they are maximally cooperating and minimally competing. This is a place-based solution for creating an agroforestry system that is also a local economy. This is another project. That's my friend Antonio. This is also a syntropic agroforestry system that's 2 months old. And the purpose of this one is continual food production. There's some plants that are ready to harvest in about 40 days, others that take 3 months, others that take a year. For the nuts and fruits, it's 5 years for the fruit trees to get established. And we have designed the system so that as it evolves in time, there's always something you can harvest and you're continually growing food. And notice that it's place-based. And this is the secret to regenerating the whole planet, is we densely plant all of these cooperative plants together in the same place. Within a 1 meter section, there'll be 30 different species and maybe 500 seeds. So that when the soil is ready, the seeds that are waiting dormant will start to activate because the nutrients they need are there. And the other plants are creating the space for them. This is a place-based solution to systemic resilience. The resilience is in the interaction of the plants localized in place. What's amazing about this is that it does the same thing to the humans, the people. When we come around one of these systems and we start planting, we get really close to each other. We learn how to cooperate with each other. We bring our different strengths and capacities, and we can have syntropic forests and centropic economies, ways that humans collaborate in place. And this is the secret to systemic resilience. So we can plant something like this cactus. Its body holds water, releasing it from its pores at night, which means if it's very close to another plant, we don't have to irrigate. But it also produces flowers that attract pollinator insects and provide food for birds. And right next to it, we can grow cotton, like what makes my shirt, and we can make clothing. They can be inches apart in the same system. And so we have this ability to create a diversity of human uses and other ecological benefits in the same system. Notice how this is the opposite of agriculture, which says destroy all of these relationships by cutting it down, plant one thing and grow as much as you can. And when you deplete soils, pour chemicals on it to replace all of the functions that these plants do naturally. This is the other way. This is creating resilience by understanding the interdependencies and designing for them to come together. So, if it's systemic risk that arises from the interdependencies of the earth, the nested regeneration, the ability to go from small to regional to large, can cascade resilience from local places to other parts of the planet. It's a nested approach, working across scales, which means the people here focus on restoring the health and well-being of here, of this place, knowing that they're going to provide benefits to other places because of those interdependencies. And then help the people in those other places because we have to stabilize the larger patterns together. And isn't it interesting? Look at that. South America seems to like organizing itself around water too. It wasn't just Africa. Here you can see that there are all these watersheds on South America. And you look at what we're doing in Barringchar and going, damn, that's inspiring. That's so cool. It's like 500,000 hectares. It's like 1 million acres. It's right up there, creating our own learning center called the Barringchar Ecoversity. And as big as our project is, it couldn't possibly regenerate the continent of South America. It's tiny compared to the continent. But what if other landscapes do the same thing? What if other places regenerate their own landscapes in the same way appropriate to their place? We could regenerate the health of the entire continent of South America. And so that brings us back to where we are here in Rochester. These Finger Lakes are super cool. See, I'm from Missouri, where we have the Ozark Plateau, and it's pretty cool. Like 8,000 caves in Missouri, and the sandstone, and it's like, it's super sweet. But we don't have those. Those things are awesome. You know, they were carved over 2 million years, ice moving back and forth, carving these deep valleys. And they like mushed up the crust so much, it turned into sand and gravel. And then it blocked the northern end and made these incredible lakes. And you know where those lakes go? They drain into Lake Ontario. Which means if you're here somewhere in the middle, wait, you are, the Genesee River right there behind us, that water is flowing from this landscape. And it's protecting one of the strategic reserves of the world. And so if you're here restoring the health of this landscape, you're embedded in these incredibly powerful, larger patterns that you can work with to do it. They are the strength of this approach. The patterns of the land are the strength of this approach. So you just look at it like, wow, look at all that drainage. You know, these are the Finger Lakes and their drainages. And it's just amazing to see that there is like a cardiovascular system of land. Because if there's no water, there's no life. This is a map of the life pattern of the land, of this place. And you can map yourselves to it and work within it and collaborate with it. And then, of course, you look back out to the larger level and go, huh, that's cool. So we're over here. I might have noticed there's this giant population down here. With all those catastrophes we're thinking about, what about sea level rise? Where are all those people going to go? This could be challenging. This could be a predicament, maybe not just a problem. There may not be a solution to that, but there is a way to navigate it. And so we start asking, what are the larger patterns of connectivity for this region? You might notice here you are in the Finger Lakes, you go, huh? Well, what if we start weaving the waters with the other places? What if we collaborate with people in Lake Erie and the other parts of Lake Ontario, over in Lake Huron, here in Lake Simcoe? This is one that we saw when we were in Toronto. Some really cool stuff up there. Like, huh, what if we collaborate? What if we're working with the waters here and the healing of land here, but we collaborate with the people up there because they're doing it? And what if we find sister cities? Like, I don't know, where Penny and I just were in Toronto. Actually, I drew this wrong. This is Cleveland. That's Erie. But you know, there's other places. Like we were down here this morning talking with these people about exactly the same thing. And we pointed at you when we were there. Like, would you guys collaborate with the people in Rochester? And they're like, hell yeah. I'm sure there are good people there. And so you can see that there's a way of seeing the systemic resilience by learning how to collaborate with each other and learning what we do in our own place. And so, so weird. North America seems to do it too. Look at that. It's like the land just knows how to organize its water. So interesting. So all these rivers, all these watersheds in North America. So if you all were up here organizing the Great Lakes, regenerating your bioregions up here, and then you think like the native people. You know, here is where the Iroquois nation was, more or less. And here were the Algonquins. They all collaborated, of course. Did you know the Algonquins in Toronto had seashells from the Gulf of Mexico? Because they would actually go across on their canoes up to Lake Simcoe, across Lake Huron, and then go over to Lake Superior and go all the way to the westernmost part of Lake Superior. You know what's over there, right in that spot? Duluth, Minnesota, which is the birthplace of the Mississippi River. The Mississippi River starts in Minnesota and goes all the way to the Gulf of Mexico. It's 40% of the continental United States. There's the Missouri River that goes to Montana. The Ohio River goes all the way to New York. The Arkansas River goes all the way to Colorado. Imagine if people up and down these different branches of the Mississippi Basin started organizing their own bioregions. Over here, this is the Colorado. Penny's from Colorado. Back in November, we were visiting 4 bioregions in the Central Rockies, including those on the western slopes of Colorado, talking about how to organize bioregions up and down the Colorado Basin. We are looking at how to regenerate an entire continent. And so we could create bioregional networks on all the continents on Earth. All right, we're in a bit of a rush. It's kind of an emergency. We might give Antarctica a pass for now. Let's just focus on the other ones, but you can see how this works. We reorganize around our own landscapes, our own bioregions, and we collaborate with the other bioregions. And we move up and down the watersheds, across the mountain ranges, into the coastal estuaries. And we reorganize the human existence on Earth to regenerate the Earth. This is how we do it. It can really be done. And so that brings me to the Design School for Regenerating Earth, which officially starts March 1st. You guys are already part of it. Sorry, I forgot to tell you. So the Design School for Regenerating Earth is based on a pretty profound and simple idea, which is that we need to learn how to see our own bioregions and learn and collaborate between them. So we're doing our part down in Barichara. We have our own bioregional learning center we're setting up there. And we're like, what are we learning there that we could teach to others? Like the slides I just showed you. You know, what could we bring to other bioregions? And that gave us the realization that we actually had a living laboratory that could become a prototype for how to create this design school. And then the design school helps weave together a planetary network of bioregions. That's why Penny and I are traveling around the Great Lakes right now, is we want to build up this network of bioregions so that we can all learn from each other, because we don't have time to get it wrong. And we have to learn as well and quickly as we can from other places that are further ahead. And if we're further ahead, we need to help those other places. Why? Because it's the right thing to do, and because there are systemic interdependencies between different parts of the earth. And the only way to be healthy and secure here is to be sure that everyone is healthy and secure in other places. And so, yeah, we've got this tinyurl.com regenerate earth. If you want to join us, just type in design school for regenerating earth. You'll find us if you want to come play. But the idea is this, that we're doing three kinds of activities. We're doing bioregional activation on the ground. You're part of our experiment and how to do it right now. These 2 weeks where we're helping to activate bioregional conversations and community dialogues in neighboring bioregions. So we do bioregional activation on the ground in this design school, which includes helping bioregions learn to regenerate themselves. We do learning journeys, online courses, workshops online. We share knowledge online with each other from the different places between the bioregions, and we engage in design labs for real-world projects. This is learning by regenerating. So learning to do it while we're doing it. It's a living experiment. And so, if those are the activities we're doing, how could we organize them for the complexity of the whole planet? Well, I already showed you how to organize continents. There are natural patterns. Well, here, we need natural rhythms, temporal patterns that organize us in time. For those of you who know about Earth regenerators, what I'm about to show you is how we organized and held the complexity for the governance system of Earth regenerators, and almost no one even knew it, even though it was designed at the beginning by our community regenerators group, which is we organized it around natural cycles. The way we're going to do it here is the bioregional activations will happen with a rhythmic pattern. The online learning journeys will happen between them. And the bioregional activations occur every 3 months. Why every 3 months? Equinox, solstice, equinox, solstice. There are natural patterns in the solar cycle of the Earth. And the learning journeys are for 8 weeks, which is lunar cycles. 2 lunar cycles and a break. Which means what Penny and I are doing now, traveling, we're going to go back and officially launch the design school, start our first learning journey, and prepare for 3 months from now when we do our next bioregional activation. So that we're going in and out of landscapes and helping sustain them with online learning supports. And then the design labs just continually emerge from the network of projects in those landscapes, because there's so much work to do. And so this means there's access to online learning. It can be complementary to educational offerings. So like if you're a master's student, you could do this as a supplement or complement to what you're doing, right? There's ability to actually participate in bioregional regeneration. This is that problem that you go online and get your permaculture design certificate or your regenerative economics certificate or whatever, and you have no place to practice. Like, no, we're going to practice. So we blend theory and practice. And then we have financial supports from the Design Schools Fund. How does that work? Interesting. So I have collaborative governance and finance, which means we need a way of keeping a continual flow of finance for the support of these projects. And it works like this. We have really low operating costs. We're not trying to make money. We actually found that we can run this whole thing on $6,000 a month, which is how much money it takes to support the livelihoods of Penny, me, and our partner, Benji. We live in Columbia. It doesn't cost much money to live there. So that all the rest of the money can go into a design school fund. And it looks like this. People will pay membership dues. It's like $50 a month, $500 a year. And the surplus money goes to people and projects in the bioregions. So just as a little thought experiment, if we had 500 people paying $50 a month, that's $25,000 a month. If we need $6,000 for operating costs, that means we have $19,000 per month to support members of the design school to do projects in the bioregions that we're working with on the ground to fund those projects. So I just wanted you to see that there is a dynamic to the living system. And by the way, this should look a lot like the way your body works, where a little bit of the energy is used, about 15, 20% for our bodies, for like the brain, for the digestive system, and the rest goes to circulating it for all the rest of the system. Here we've got a fixed cost and growable to whatever size of membership we have. And then people can apply for funding to do their projects. We can allocate funding to different bioregions so that they can allocate it to their own projects, so that we keep a continual circulation of resources for the projects to happen as a way of funding this, so that we don't ever have to look for outside money. And so we're on our tour, Penny and I, we're right here. We already went through Toronto, Binghamton, Ithaca, Cleveland. Here we are, the end of our tour. On Sunday, we're gonna go back to Columbia. And the question, Jonathan should recognize this because I screenshotted it from his slide deck. This is Jonathan's question. Is there enough, I've been asking everyone these last 2 weeks, your question, Jonathan, this is a good one. Is there enough interest and enough commitment to attend future meetings, to expand into a discussion of creating a bioregional learning center here in Rochester, and to collaborate across the entire Great Lakes? As Jonathan's been asking several people in the last 2 months. Some of you have seen him do this. I know John has. And so this is a real question for us. Is there real interest and capacity to do this here? Because Penny and I are just passing through. We're just bringing you the idea. How do you want to do this? It's your community. And so you could always come visit us in Bright Charter, of course. The question I have is, are you ready to become an earth regenerator? Which is, are you ready to believe that the earth is better off with our humans? As earth is a she produced all life, I think she's a mother. Are you ready to become a regenerator of the earth? Which means that you understand what you're doing here is connected to healing the entire planet. And the related question is, can you organize yourselves into a bioregion? Can you figure out what your bioregion is? Can you make it coherent with the life of this place? And so that's what I want to talk with you guys about. So you see, like, we go through this sort of roller coaster of, holy shit, the world's pretty screwed up. I could F-bomb that one if I wanted to. So we're in a really dire moment. And in just this moment, we know what we have to do. And so I'd love to have a conversation. I see that it is now 7:20. So we got some time. We can do a little shift into process and how we can have a conversation about this, because I am done with my presentation. And so I'm not sure how we can do this for the people that are online. They might want to have their own discussions and we can have one here. If there's anyone online who can facilitate that. Victoria, what do you want to ask?
You have an Apple, an iPhone, or
Yes.
Awesome, thank you. So what I think is, for those who are online, if one of you could volunteer to hold discussion, you guys could all have chats with yourselves. I think here what we should do is actually get
Hi, everyone. I don't know what happened, but I'll stand here. You can hear me. We're actually going to do breakouts here and have discussions. And we'd love to encourage you guys to have group discussions amongst yourselves while we're here. Is there anyone in Zoom that could offer to facilitate the calls?
The phone died.
Ah, the phone died. That's what happened. So, yeah, sorry, the phone that was, my microphone died. So I wonder if there's someone that could volunteer to lead discussion among the people on Zoom. Oh, they don't have the authority. Wow, is there someone like to volunteer to be host? Yeah, I don't know if you need to go and, Eric, can you do it?
I
Yeah.
could, but not sure how. So Eric says can do.
Yeah, so if Eric can do it,
Okay.
doesn't have enablement. I don't know if I can make Eric co-host or not as a co-host. Let me see. I'm co-host.
Good.
Nope, I don't have the authority.
I'll work on this.
Yeah,
You
so
want to make Eric a co-host?
yeah, so we'll get it taken care of. John's gonna take care of it. So yeah, but is that part to the business? Yeah, I would say that we have a profoundly unsustainable system, that a lot of it is going to prove itself unsustainable. And what we need is the life flow. And so life is very good at taking what is available and putting it to use and service to life. And that's a big point. Well, that's a good context of the conversation. And I love to say, I will set a timer at 7:26 now. In 15 minutes, I'll come around and see how you all are doing. And then we can sort of regroup and then see if we want to do another one. Sound good? Awesome. And I'll just float if anyone needs me. I want some. I think this person's and yet, let's go to agendas.
So,
Or better.
I'm really thinking going. What kind of information that we just presented? And we have some knowledge about permaculture. Waters and waters. And I keep thinking of what is mine to do. And I think that I believe that Mother Earth is going to shape the parasite. And that's. Sense. It didn't make sense that. So there's a sense that. Exhausted. Temporary satisfaction. And the idea is to do something. I would offer that some of us are acting like that. Some of us are acting different. And so those of us that are responsible and accountable for future generations are going to be the key step of what's going to bring about the medicines and what we're going to do. So there's a very big shift. Yeah.
putting together, then a collective intelligence of the people who knew the different parts of the American history. of all of them. And it wasn't very good. Actually, none of us like it. But there was a part of the advisory council that said half of the money should go to one of the projects in the advisory council. But it had nothing to do with the members of the advisory council saying it. Which was that the Bioparque Moncora had representatives on the council, and they said, we're not going to ask for money. And everyone else said, your project's so important, we're giving half of it to you. And this was because they saw the priority of that project for the territory. So just to show how the selection for a higher level of cooperation dramatically increases the likelihood of success of the cooperative level, which is the level of the landscape. So yeah, there's a lot more to say about this, but I speak about it in conceptual terms, not to be theoretical, although it is theoretical as well, but to say that there are general principles, and there are many ways to do them.
And that's why
Yeah.
it's called social.
Yeah, it's fundamental. Because we select for the level of the group and its purpose. And we build the emotional and social capacities to do it and to thrive while doing it. So it addresses the regulation of emotions, the psychological flexibility of the individual members, and it addresses the power dynamics of the interaction between them to achieve the collective goals. Yeah, so there's a lot to this. And I think the important thing for right now, because it's 8:30 and this is probably a good time for us to actually let this digest and to sleep on it, is that when I came to the idea that we needed to organize this bioregions and create this planetary network, and then I discovered that Dana Meadows, of all, like Dana Meadows is a pretty respectable person. She's a smart lady. That I was stumbling upon her ideas. And then I was so glad to say, well, she came up with it and give her credit, was to say, wow, I had come to, through my own search and collaborating with people, to the same solid grounding of a path that others had found before. But what they didn't have in 1983 was all this knowledge about how we actually do it. And we've come so far in how to do it in the last 40 years that they articulated it and they didn't know how to do it. And so, and like Earth system science was a baby then. Climate models sucked in the early 1980s. And our Earth observing system, which is NASA's great accomplishment, creating the sensor network and satellite network with decades of continuous data for tracking planetary change, is of immense value. And the first operational satellite was put in space in 1972. A weather satellite. I studied satellite remote sensing. And the first climate models were invented by the US military to track atomic bomb testing of the Soviet Union. They needed to be able to back calculate when they detected radiation in the air, what was its source, and they created climate models, these general circulation models, to try to back calculate 12 hours to find out where the explosions were, to see if someone was violating a weapons treaty. That was the invention of climate models. And look how far they've come. And so we're in a time now where there's like immense, like overwhelming knowledge and capacity. And what we have to learn is how do we organize it? And that's where we organize it around landscapes, and we organize it around collective purposes. And we scale upward, like the Great Lakes, we scale upward to these other things. So, so there's a method in the madness, so to speak. This isn't an approach come too lightly. In my own journey, it's 20 years, but I'm building on like thousands of people's knowledge. And that's just me, I'm one person. So the invitation for all of you is to practice doing this and to bring more people in, like those 100 leaders of the climate network. Hell yes, bring them into this. Help them be more effective, because I'm sure they're frustrated as hell. You know, like, yeah.
Just looking for somebody to tell them how to do it.
Yeah, And it is known in quotes. The knowledge is barely integrated, meaning there's still more integrating to do. And we have to learn by doing. It's a big lab. It's an experiment. We got to prototype this. We got to learn and change and evolve and adapt. And that is exactly what pro-social groups do. They're adaptive intelligence in a group. And so that's maybe a good place for us to stop for the evening. And there's like this flyer over here, this blue flyer says our schedule for tomorrow. We can adapt it if we want to.
Basically 2 to 4 tomorrow at the Memorial Rundell
Library.
Library, the original. Rochester, from 2 to 4, but we also have a field trip. The
Yeah.
Tennessee, Lake Ontario, the wetlands.
Yeah. And so
Here at 10 o'clock tomorrow, going in the ground floor or around there, but basically at 10, going walking up the bridge to watch St. Paul's. So, you know, we can either come here or we can just on the bridge.
yeah.
And we'll just be there for like 15 minutes. So.
Yeah, and the flyer's right here. And then just in general, Victoria and Jonathan have been organizing this mainly because Penny and I harassed them into it. And they're lovely people, so they've taken, no, they,
They're going to Toronto, they come here, but-
yeah. And so just recognizing their role is to support the process until it becomes more coherent. Yeah. Yeah. And just so you know, John is part of a group called Ecosystem Restoration Alliance that's trying to do very similar things with knowledge sharing around the world. And I'm sure all of us here have our other connections and networks that we're all part of in this. That's why this can work, because we have all this connectivity and these amazing people. Like Penny and I were in Ithaca earlier this week, talking to people from a group that used to be called Sustainable Tompkins, and they just changed their name to Sustainable Finger Lakes. And they are connected to groups across the Finger Lakes. Some of you may know them. And so just like we're all weaving. And this is why this is both, obviously it's like the 11th hour, and it's possible. So thank you all for coming, for letting me ramble a bit, and for talking with each other. And I hope to see all of you tomorrow and beyond, and onward we go.
Yeah. Joe's got some books that he authored, and sign them.
Now, I meant to introduce Joe while waving his books.
I don't promote my book very well, it's fine.
Really recommend. I've looked at a lot of books on this whole syndrome.
Could you repeat the logistics for tomorrow for the people online? We didn't really hear what was being said locally.
Yeah, I'll step over here. So tomorrow people are meeting at the ground floor of Greentopia.
10 o'clock.
Yeah, 10 o'clock. Flyer here. It's also on the, was it the Regenerate Rochester website? Rochester.org. You'll find it there. And then at 2 o'clock, we are meeting at the Rundell Memorial Library.
2 o'clock. Okay.
Yeah, and it's the meeting room on the 3rd floor, you said? There's a meeting room on the 3rd floor. But if you go to possiblerochester.org/JOE, which is right here on this flyer.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. No, thanks for asking, Eric. And
Thank
everyone
you.
who's on here, hi, Rick and Estella. We're going to see you guys for breakfast. Looking forward to pancakes. And everyone else, have a good night.
Thank you very much.
We'll talk to y'all soon.
And
Hopefully,
wonderful
it's
message.
tomorrow. All right.
Thank you so much. Good night.